Hey, thanks so much for having me out here. And a special thanks to Gray Area and RCA for hosting. I'm excited to be part of the Creative Code meetup. A little bit of my background. My dad is a computer pioneer, so I had a unique childhood, and I was raised in this kind of crazy environment with these giant machines. No joke. In the late 70s, that guy was kind of like me, except as a little kid. And I worked with these terminals, similar to this sort of terminal. And in 1982, I had a computer very similar to this, called the Plato computer, that was on my desk in my bedroom as a 11, 12-year-old. And with that computer, it was a network computer that had connections to about 30,000 other network computers in the world. And so no other kid, of course, had this sort of thing. No other adult had this sort of thing. And you could email, do IM, and all that. And it was super interesting. And I had my first online romance at the age of 12 in 1982 with a 13-year-old girl. It was actually a real girl and not a 40-year-old dude. And we would exchange pictures by mail and talk about our feelings. It was all pre-adolescent, pretty innocent stuff. But it had this sort of formative virtual experience where I would have this space of virtual interaction that no one else my age had or had access to. So it's kind of like my own little private space. And my friends would come over occasionally and we'd talk about it, and I'd show them what I was doing, and they didn't get it at all. And fast forward to some of the projects I've done more recently. I have a background doing software development and coding, and after art school, I graduated in 2006 from the School Art Institute of Chicago. I started doing performance art in Second Life. And who here remembers Second Life at all? A few of us. Okay, so it's not such a relevant space anymore, but for a while it was a pretty interesting space to be part of. I didn't use it that much for socializing, but I used it a lot for performance art. So we had a performance group of 7 of us in different cities across the world. My avatar is there, the purple guy with the wings. And we also had avatars in Italy, 1 in London, 1 in Chicago, 1 in New York, and 2 in Canada. We had a number of performances we did in Second Life. We did ones ranging from real-life real-life shows where we had projections in real life, maybe a speaker, one of us, interventions in Second Life, text-based performances. My favorite were the weird interventions we did in the online virtual world of Second Life. So in Second Life, people would typically dress like have avatars that looked like younger, sexier versions of themselves. And they would dress in very conventional clothes like khakis and whatever, and go to nightclubs and start dancing and try to pick each other up. And I was like, well, you're in Second Life. Why would you want to do that? Like, why not do something crazy like a zombie performance? And so we made, our group made this idea of doing an intervention where we would dress up like zombies and try to invite other people to join our performance. And we would essentially go find like a space with a bunch of people, ask them to join our performance, and what we would do is we'd give them a zombie package and say, we're doing a performance, come and join us. They'd wear a zombie skin, and then they'd hold this zombie teddy bear, and that was the code that I wrote that would make your avatar like spew blood and try to bite people and act like a zombie might act. Within about 30 minutes, we had a 40 or 50 person horde of zombies running throughout Second Life and infecting the place and acting like crazy yahoos that we were. And some of the avatars said that this was the most fun they ever had in the version in Second Life, and I had made a whole bunch of virtual friends, and these folks were super psyched about what could be done with Second Life. And for me, this idea of what I could do with code had opened up. And up to that point, I had been doing educational software where it had been fairly prescriptive, and there's so much uncertainty involved in online performance art that I thought this was just such a wonderful way to write code and engage with art making. A project I did more recently, which is definitely very uncertain, is called Tweets in Space. And this is a collaboration with my colleague, Nathaniel Stern, who is a professor of digital arts over in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And the idea behind Tweets in Space is that we decided to send Twitter messages to a nearby habitable exoplanet that might support human-like biological life. The target exoplanet was GJ667cc. It's about 22 light years away. So it'll take another 20 years for it to come back to us. And it has the ideal conditions to support life, we think. It has water, stable orbit, axial tilt. We don't know that much more about the planet. And we build this as a performance at ISEA, the International Symposium on Electronic Art in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And for 30 minutes, and 30 minutes only, you could send a hashtag anywhere in the world with send tweet anywhere in the world with the hashtag tweets in space, and we would capture it in this back-end Twitter bucket for later transmission. So essentially, this was a worldwide performance that repurposed what you could do with social media. The folks at Twitter were super excited about it and helped us promote it a bit. And it got a coverage in, to make this performance successful, we had to get coverage in a number of mainstream media sources. So we ended up getting coverage in about 40, 50, 60 media sources. And the real one that kicked it off was Wired Science, which they wrote about it the morning before the event. And getting random people in the world to tweet on a Friday night was kind of daunting. But once we got that coverage, we were pretty sure it was going to be a success. So this is the live performance. We had about 100 people live in the venue in Albuquerque as part of this festival. And this is one of the few times that you can tell people to bring out their cell phones and please use them in a performance. And this is the double projection animation software that I wrote that was part of the performance. And you can't see it super well. I'm going to show an animation in just a sec. And here's what it kind of looks like. And so those tweets would be scrolling up live from the sides of the buildings. The windows turn on and off. The satellites track these ships and laser beam Twitter messages onto the ships, and they take them out to deep space. So that was part of the animation code that was doing the tweet scraping. And so this is the interface we had for people to look at live and see what was going on. And so it was this orgiastic kind of Twitter experience in this really short amount of time. We ended up getting about 1,500 tweets in 30 minutes, so it ends up being about a tweet a second. And we broadcast this about a month and a half after the event. It took about a month and a half for the planet to come in alignment with Earth, and we rented out satellite time on a satellite dish station over in Florida, and it'll take 20 and a half years for those Twitter messages to reach the planet. Here's some of the tweets that we got. A lot of them saying, hi aliens, this is here on Earth. I love everyone, so there's tons of love and goodwill being expressed. People are curious about the aliens. Of course, a lot of people were saying, don't eat us. And there were a lot of popular cultural references. And this was the one that surprised me the most. There's tons of people that were apologetic for the poor behavior of human beings. So people essentially saying like, we've acted like a bunch of idiots in the past, but we're not really that bad. Concurrent to Tweets in Space, I started looking at algorithms as performance personalities on the web. And one project I did on my own was one called Playing Duchamp, and for those of you who aren't familiar with Marcel Duchamp, he's sort of the godfather of conceptual art, and worked with this idea of taking the art object and what an art object is and redefining its place in the museum. But Duchamp was an amazing thinker, practical joker. He claims to have loved chess more than art. So he gave up making art for about 20 years and worked solely on chess. And during this time, he was playing for the French national team, and he attained the rank of master during those years. And so I decided to pay homage to Duchamp and proposed a project with Turbulence.org, who gave me funding. They're a networked art agency and gave me a bit of funding to make this happen. And what I did is I consulted with various chess experts and reconstructed an online personality of Marcel Duchamp you could play chess against. And so essentially you could choose to play Marcel Duchamp, the conceptual artist, godfather of art, in a chess match. And it was really tricky because I had to work with how does a person like Duchamp play chess? And I'm not an expert at chess. I know the rules pretty well, but I had to go deep into the algorithms and spend a lot of time consulting. And there was about 72 recorded games of Duchamp's in history. And so I had to work with essentially dumbing down a modern-day chess engine to play as if it were his level and looking at the types of openings he did and the types of mistakes that he would make. And Duchamp had a tendency, for example, to have blunders late in a game, and he would get tired. So essentially the chess engine gets tired sometimes and messes up. This is a project I'm doing more recently called Bot Collective, and also is part of this online personality. And this is a project I'm doing at Autodesk. It's in process, so it's not complete, but it's following the same kind of idea. And the basic idea is it's a collection of Twitter bots which live on physical Raspberry Pi devices, and they're all open source. And they have bodies, they have shells they're sculptural objects. This is the website, botcollective.com. It's active right now. I have about 8 or 9 of these bots currently going. This is by no means the first set of Twitter bots around. there's a number of other ones that we all know about. Horse eBooks is probably my favorite, which people thought was a Twitter bot, but was actually a person. And so, and there's Stealth Mountain, Kim Kierkegaard, which mashes up Kim Kardashian and Kierkegaard quotes, and the list goes on and on. So I want to see tons more of bots. I want to see these Twitter bots everywhere. But one of the things I decided to write up in response to Horse eBooks was a manifesto and key to this is that all bots must identify themselves as a bot and not to try to pass themselves off as humans. And also, for the bot collective, you have to be housed in a physical body. That's essential to the project. So the first round of bots that I made were a series of quote bots. It's more of a proof of concept. So Mark Twain, Sun Tzu, and many others. These all live in this little bot house. They're kind of a multiple personality bot. Also working with mashup bots. So this is Lenin bot, which mixes John Lennon and Vladimir Lenin quotes. And so you end up getting these really funny ones, like communism is everyone's business. I think we all agree. And this is a data feed spot that I'm just about to put online probably tomorrow, and it scrapes Wikipedia for recent celebrity deaths. Wikipedia has a page of who's died just recently, and so I have a cron tab cron job that's just running out every minute, and then we'll do things like this, scrape Wikipedia and come out with immediate RIPs, so you can get a live data feed of just who's died. A little bit macabre. This is a Selfies bot, which is, this is the current, what Selfies bot looks like right now, but it's a bot that's going to be taking selfies. And that's the primary project I'm working on at Autodesk in terms of electronics and Raspberry Pi. And it's got to be portable, too, which makes it a little harder. So I'm working with batteries and physical containers and little monitors, and it's going to be working in about 2 weeks. So stay tuned. A lot of people have asked me why physical bodies. And I feel like physical bodies are important for the bots because by making them physical, I'm taking them out of unknown servers with unknown places and making them into art objects that can be shipped to different museums. And when I ship them, they go offline when they're in transit for a week. Also, the internet is full of cables and wires, and we often don't think about that. And I want to bring attention to the fact that these bots have a personality and a longevity and a lifespan to them. And Twitter's not going to be around forever. These bots are not going to be around forever. And these are some of the other bots I'm currently thinking of. The list, there's so many that are on the list, and the real bottleneck right now is making the bodies and the electronics for them rather than writing the Python code for it. The primary project I've been super excited about at Autodesk has been one called Data Crystals, and it's a form of data visualization. My background is in software programming, but 2 years ago I took a job at the Exploratorium as a fixed-term job, so it was to help the museum go into a new space. And I was working there learning data visualization techniques, and I wrote a lot of software and electronics for the new museum. I did all the software and electronics for this piece, which is called Tidal Memory, and it essentially is a tidal clock. And it shows daily tide levels each day. So on the the left side of your screen is midnight, then 1 in the morning, then 2 in the morning. So those tide levels will kind of display over time, and the water will pump up from a shared manifold and lock in at each hour. So essentially, you visualize what the tide levels of each day. And so it's like this sort of slow kinetic sculpture. I also worked more recently with the Urban Data Hackathon, which GAFTA and SwissNext and Berkeley New Media Center hosted, and our team got second place. It was pretty exciting. I've never done a hackathon before, and one of the ideas that we came up with was visualizing particulate matter. In the hackathon, we had this data set, over here, which showed different levels of emissions at 4 different locations along Market Street. And so our idea was to map the particulate emissions into various icons of buses and people and cars and trucks and so on. So I did this animation that showed these different particulate emissions. So, people have very certain kinds of emissions like EMF, but they don't have nitrous, and buses have nitrous but no EMF. And so this hackathon experience was kind of amazing. It was super hard to write something in 7 hours with people I didn't know, but we got second place, and it was really fun. But with data crystals, I kept on thinking about this question of what does data look like? And we think of data as a series of comma delimited fields, timestamps, numbers like that, or maybe some sort of data visualization, kind of like the hackathon visualization, where we come up with a story that we're trying to tell through a mix of design and data. And the residency at Autodesk gave me the opportunity to work with 3D printers, which I was super excited about. I hadn't worked with them until February. And I started looking at possible data sources and looked at the San Francisco Open Data Portal, which has a number of amazing points of data, anywhere from parking meters to trees to San Francisco crime incidences, and it's all free and available to be used by anyone. And so this is the development data, a very hot topic in San Francisco, mapped into 3D space. So this is San Francisco over here. This is the northern part of San Francisco. This is the waterfront, Pier 9, et cetera. This is the Mission District, see how much stuff is going on. And then this is Candlestick Park over here. And so we can see just by mapping that out in 3D space what that data might, how those patterns of data might look. What my code does is it slowly clusters the data into blocks that can be 3D printed. So of course you can't 3D print like a million data points in space, but you get to be in sort of clustered objects. And so it will cluster over, in this case, pretty quickly, but in the case of a lot of data points, very slowly. This is what the finished crystal of the development data looks like. And these small little points here are small housing units. So maybe someone's remodeling and adding like a bedroom. These larger ones over here are 300, 400 or so units at a time. And this is what the finished data crystal looks like. It kind of fits into the palm of someone's hand if their hand is really large. And so with the data crystals, I want to try to work with space rather than time. And I think with most data visualizations, we're used to having a slider and moving that along a timeline, essentially being God and controlling what time looks like. And with all these, I want to look at just making these into one moment in time. This is the data crystal of crime data in San Francisco, 35,000 data points. And crime happens all over in San Francisco, so it's not as like kind of out there as the development data. And some of the data is like really small cubes here would be something like marijuana possession, prostitution, something that's not too serious. Really large ones would be ones like a murder or a kidnapping. And one question people have asked me is legibility. And my thought with that is that legibility is kind of an interesting conversation because in the UX community and the design community, a lot of people are talking about how to tell stories with data, essentially using data to somehow illustrate a point or to get people to act or to get people to think about something in a different way. And in a way, it's sort of manipulating the data to your own ends or trying to find a way to have an experience. And I want to look at it in a more raw form and see just aesthetically what it looks like. Although there is some legibility. So this is San Francisco art commissions, the location of all the art collections in San Francisco, about 800 data points. And this is what it looks like in the 3D space. So you have like Civic Center, City Hall, library, some of these sort of stacked areas where you have tons of art. This is the San Francisco airport, which also has a lot of art. And in the data crystal, you have the city halls over here, down libraries over here, and this tail ends up being San Francisco airport. So if you look really closely, there's some information there you can glean. This is something I've been working with more recently is world population data and looking at mapping every city in a spherical globe space and then clustering those over time and seeing what happens. This took a long, long time to cluster up because it's so big and it's not all tightly wound data. And I ended up getting this kind of crystal out of it. I took this picture this morning. This giant block here is Tokyo, so that's the biggest city in the world. Let's see, Sao Paulo, Rio are over here on the end. This is the Pacific Ocean. I've also been working with any type of data and looking at biometric data. So this is me with an EEG reading headset and thinking about what that might look like. So this is the data plot in real time. And what I'm getting are two data points, or what we call attention, or like a mixture of various alpha and beta levels in your brain, and meditation, which is a mixture of a different number of different, I don't think I have the levels quite right. Anyways, the attention is the more sharp, like if you drink a cup of coffee, you get stressed out kind of data, and and the relaxation is the more kind of like you just come out of a yoga class kind of data. And this is what this data crystal looks like. So for me, this data looks like something that's spiky, this black kind of aggro data mixed in aesthetically with this like more clear kind of data. So this is an ongoing thing that I've been interested in doing and pursuing, is this idea of taking a data set, algorithmically transforming it, and somehow making it into a 3D space or a 3D object. And this residency has been amazing in this, opened up just a small little kernel of that possibility. I'm not sure where I'm going to go from here with that idea, but that's where I see my creative coding and new media practice going after this. Great, thank you.